Molly here. For those of you who are new to our channel, I'm just going to let you know how this works. First, we will give a recap of the episode, then we will give a review. There will be a bookmark, so that if you don't need to listen to the recap, you can skip directly to the review. So, today we're going to talk about Disney Doctor Who, Season 2, Episode 2, Lux, written by Russell Davies. The episode opens in a movie theater in Miami, Florida in 1952. The audience is watching the newsreels and cartoons before a fictitious Rock Hudson film. The newsreel is about the atomic bomb testing and Queen Elizabeth's period of mourning, and the cartoon is something called Mr. Ring-a-Ding. The moon shines down on the projection, and Mr. Ring-a-Ding comes to life. He gets into it with an audience member and comes out of the screen into the real world and tells the audience, "Don't make me laugh." The opening credits roll, and now we're in the TARDIS with the Disney Doctor and Belinda. The Disney Doctor has built a device to pull the TARDIS into May 24th, 2025, since it keeps bouncing off that day. They will need multiple readings to triangulate before this maneuver can be attempted. They land in 1952, and Belinda is actually excited and eager to go outside the TARDIS and see 1952. She even realizes that her clothing should be changed before going outside. The Disney Doctor is super excited and gets all dolled up in appropriate style, and they actually did a nice job on clothing and hairstyle. Belinda is actually smiling and enjoying herself. It's 4 a.m., and they're all dressed up with no one to see, but the Disney Doctor says 1952, that might be wise. Which I appreciated, because they weren't going to ignore the reality of the time period. There were a few details that were wrong. Someone pointed out that some of the music was too early, and I will point out that Rock Hudson having leading man top billing as shown on the theater marquee was 2 years too soon, and the film The Harvest Bringer was fictitious. But for the most part, I appreciated the details that they did get right. Belinda sees Rock Hudson's name on the marquee and comments that they talked about him in her HIV training course, and how it's weird being there in 1952 because they know how things turn out for Rock Hudson. The Disney Doctor points out that the doors on the movie theater are chained closed. They see the public notice of closure on the main door and a memorial of flowers and notes to several people on the doorstep. The triangulation from that time period finishes, and Belinda goes to get back in the TARDIS and leave. It's obvious the Disney Doctor doesn't want to go, and Belinda accuses him of wanting to investigate the spooky old theater and tells the Disney Doctor he's Scooby-Doo. The Disney Doctor corrects her and tells her he's Velma. They go into the diner across the street and get coffee. The young man behind the counter tells them about the 15 people who went missing and the stories people are telling about what they think happened. The young man calls over to a woman sitting alone in a booth and tells her the Disney Doctor and Belinda are asking about the disappearances. The woman's son, Tommy Lee, was one of the people who went missing from the theater. She tells the young man she'll talk to anyone about her boy if the young man will bend the rules. The young man says he has no problem with that. It's nighttime and no one is there to see. The Disney Doctor explains to Belinda that in segregated 1952, she's considered black and they're breaking the law just by being in the diner. This upsets Belinda, but the Disney Doctor basically tells her those are the rules of the time and they have to live in it. Tommy Lee's mom tells Belinda and the Disney Doctor about Tommy Lee and how the police searched the theater multiple times and found nothing. The Disney Doctor asks if they searched at night, and Tommy Lee's mom says no, why? And the Disney Doctor tells her things are different at night. Tommy Lee's mom tells them she will sit in that diner forever waiting for her son to come home, and she thought the police had given up. But she noticed someone parked a police box outside the theater, and seeing the police box has given her hope. The Disney Doctor tells Tommy Lee's mom that he will try to find her son. Belinda and the Disney Doctor walk out of the diner and can hear a film playing in the theater across the street. The young man from the diner is outside tying up the patio umbrellas and tells them that the theater's caretaker, Mr. Pye, is still in the theater running the films at night. The Disney Doctor imploringly tells Belinda there is a haunted theater with an old caretaker, and Belinda says, "Okay, Velma." And the Disney Doctor says, "Come on, Fred," and they go break into the theater. They go inside and discover a film playing to an empty theater. The Disney Doctor calls out to Mr. Pye, saying he knows it's segregated space, but they wanted to say hello. Mr. Pie is hiding in the projection booth, and he wants the Disney Doctor and Belinda to go away. But then the film stops, and the screen curtains start to move, and Mr. Pie is saying, "No, no, no." It's clear something bad is about to happen, and Mr. Pie is begging someone not to hurt Belinda and the Disney Doctor. Belinda and the Disney Doctor hear tap dancing, and then Mr. Ring-a-Ding shows up. They make introductions, and the Disney Doctor says, "Mr. Ring-a-Ding is made of light." The Disney Doctor asks what happened to the people in the theater, and Mr. Ring-a-Ding tells the Disney Doctor that he appeared and they disappeared, and if the Disney Doctor solves that, the people might come back. Belinda starts asking questions like what Mr. Ring-a-Ding is a cartoon of, and pointing out he's blue with a pig nose, and Mr. Ring-a-Ding keeps answering with, "Don't make me laugh." The Disney Doctor then asks if there's a reason why they shouldn't make him laugh. The Disney Doctor then realizes Mr. Ring-a-Ding is dangerous and tells Belinda to get back. He asks Mr. Ring-a-Ding who he is, and Mr. Ring-a-Ding says, "Don't make me laugh because it sounds like this." And then he did that toy maker's laugh. And the letters on the marquee outside the theater fall, and the letters that are left spell Harbinger. And this is where I groaned out loud and stopped enjoying the episode. The creature identifies itself as Lux and turns nasty. This was just before the 20-minute mark of a 44-minute episode. After this, it was just turned into a waste of screen time. Like Davies had run out of story and just needed filler, so I'm going to just gloss over the rest. Belinda and the Disney Doctor meet up with Mr. Pie in the booth. He's been helping Lux because Lux brought the image of Pie's dead wife to life, and the missing people are trapped on film hanging in the booth. Belinda and the Disney Doctor get sucked into the film, so they turn into 2D cartoon form, and their depth is returned by telling sad truths to each other. They try to break out of the frame Daffy Duck style and get faked out that they've made it, but then a cop and Tommy Lee's mom show up to have them arrested for being in a whites-only theater, but the Disney Doctor figures out that that's not real. The Disney Doctor and Belinda somehow wind up having tea with Doctor Who fans, and they eventually escape by holding the frame in place until the film burns in the projector, and this frees Belinda and the Disney Doctor. The Disney Doctor knows this time is real because his hand got burned, and he uses some of his bi-generation energy to heal himself. Then Mr. Ring-a-Ding sicks the film on them, like the literal film, comes out of the projector and grabs the Disney Doctor and strings him up. So the projector can project light through the Disney Doctor and feed his Time Lord energy to Mr. Ring-a-Ding. The Disney Doctor figures out light will defeat Mr. Ring-a-Ding and sends Belinda to let the light in, and she heads for the film closet but needs a match to light it up. She asks Mr. Pie for a match, and he tells her to get out of the theater and he will light the fire himself, which he does. Somehow there's an explosion which blows a hole in the building, letting the sunlight in and freeing the Disney Doctor. Mr. Ring-a-Ding feeds on the light and grows so big he leaves the Earth, spreads out in the universe. He says he's everything and he's nothing and says goodbye. Then the people who were missing come out of the theater and are reunited with their loved ones. The Disney Doctor and Belinda slip away, and Mrs. Flood shows up and points Tommy Lee, his mom, and the young man from the diner in the direction of the disappearing TARDIS. She tells them the show ends May the 24th. The end. Well, there were a few things I actually enjoyed about this episode. Honestly, I actually enjoyed the first 20 minutes, even with the somewhat heavy-handed mentions of things like Rock Hudson and his battle with AIDS. The thing that bothered me about that was that if they had just set this 2 years later, that would have actually fit the time frame of when Rock Hudson became top billing leading man instead of just supporting. Because the marquee outside, it only listed Rock Hudson's name, which that was anachronistic. He did not have top billing for films in 1952. And I'm just kind of weird that I know some information about Rock Hudson. There was a whole phase where we sat and just watched episodes of Macmillan and Wife. So I really did get into a little bit of Rock Hudson at that point in time. So I know that was anachronistic. So that bothered me a little bit. And the fact that it was a film that didn't even exist because they needed to spell Harbinger, that bothered me as well, because again, that's just feeding into that whole Harbinger thing, that all the gods and everything. I thought that was over with when Sutekh died. Clearly I was wrong, because I hated that stuff. To me, that's too much fantasy in my Doctor Who. I would prefer to go back in the science fiction direction. And it looks like they're just doubling down on that crap. I really thought we had that behind us. So that's when that flashed on the screen. When he did that, when Mr. Ring-a-Ding did that laugh that the toy maker did, I was just like, oh, no. No, 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 no. So that happened. And honestly, like, the rest of the episode was a mess. Like, if you're going to redo something that somebody else did, don't be worse at it. Because that trying to hold the frames still or go from frame to frame, that was that Daffy Duck episode, Duck Amuck, when Bugs Bunny was screwing with him. You know, not me, you slop artist. Why are you doing this, Russell, you slop artist? That's what I just want to ask him. What the hell? And I wasn't even sure if I should be offended about the portrayal of the Doctor Who fans. I don't know. I still don't know. Just like, whatever. I have no idea what the hell that was. But you know what? At least the fact that they were in 1952, which, yeah, I know a lot of people are complaining, well, why do you have to go back to 1952? Well, they did. You know, but at least it was handled with more grace than they handled when Jodie Whittaker went back and met King James I. That was appalling. I mean, that was really, really bad. Because you at least address what's going on in the time period, and I felt like they did it in a respectful manner.
Last week, I pointed out how in that Robot Revolution episode that there was some homage being done to classic science fiction. In particular, I mentioned that bridge reminded me a lot of the Forbidden Planet underground facility scene. And the only thing I can think of with the being inside the frame and moving the film around, and it definitely was a Duck Amuck, is Duck Amuck, I think, was like 1953 or 52. It was around that same time period this was set. So my guess is maybe that was Russell Davies paying homage to Warner Brothers' Duck Amuck.
That would be nice. I hope that's what he was trying to do, because otherwise, I have no idea.
Because I'm seeing people saying, well, just how original this fourth wall breaking thing was. It's not. I know our channel skews older, so I know most of our audience is familiar with that Duck Amuck Looney Tunes installment. And if you're not, I'm pretty sure the episode's on YouTube. Just type Duck Amuck, 1952, 53, whatever it says comes up. Watch it. That's where this idea came from. So what the Disney Doctor was doing with Belinda wasn't anything unique, except they were making a live-action version of it for a while.
Yeah, and that being said, the drawing style of Mr. Ring-a-Ding didn't fit the time period either. The drawing style of Mr. Ring-a-Ding was more of a 1930s look. This was obviously supposed to be 1952.
Yeah, he reminded me of the drawing style, if he was in black and white, of like Betty Boop or Steamboat Willie, that kind of pipe cleaner, bouncy guy look, which I usually take to be from that early era of cartoons. That's not to say it couldn't be from the 50s, but it felt like it was like a decade and a half later drawing style than it should have been. That's a nitpick, but just something as I've watched a lot of cartoons, and so I thought that was odd, although I'm open to somebody pointing out how maybe I'm off on that. It just didn't look to me like it fit 1952's cartoon, because if you go to Duck Amuck that we mentioned, which was from that time period, that Bugs Bunny Daffy Duck doesn't look anything like the pipe cleaner type bouncy characters that you would expect from Steamboat Willie and Betty Boop.
Yeah, and another big franchise that was very popular at that point in time is Tom and Jerry. And I know I spent a lot of time as a kid watching that era Tom and Jerry, and it didn't look like that. Like, the drawing style is just, it's not right for the time period. I really wish that they had either set it earlier so that the drawing style would have matched the time period, but then they wouldn't have been able to use Rock Hudson. Or if they'd set it slightly later, made it correct with Rock Hudson and used a more fitting drawing style for Mr. Ring-a-Ding, that would have helped a lot, at least for me.
I didn't like the Mr. Ring-a-Ding concept at all, because I agree with you, Molly. The first half of the episode, when they landed in 52 Miami, and they were trying to figure out what was happening at the quote-unquote haunted theater. And they did lightly address the segregation that would have existed back then. All that seemed to work fine. Like, even the segregation mentioned at that diner, I thought was fine. It reminded me of that episode, the Sylvester McCoy episode with Ace, and she was at that, was it a flop house of some sort?
It was a rooming house.
And there was a sign there that said something like whites only or something.
Yeah.
And, Ace was kind of upset about reading that when she found out what that meant. And this was kind of like that, so I didn't mind that. But what I did mind was when they were going through their duck amuck, and the doctor and Belinda thought for a moment that they were out of that situation with the film strip, and the cop showed up and pointed out this was a whites-only theater, and then the doctor figured out, oh, well, this is not real, your badge doesn't match up, it's a New York City badge or something. The problem with that, the reason I didn't laugh, is because that type of story twist of going full-blown, let me point out all the racism that would be involved in this hyperbole situation, that's something Russell Davies would do. So it made me grit my teeth when he did that, and then when he pulled the old psych at the end, well, I didn't find relief or humor from that, because that's the kind of crap that Russell Davies I expected in this whole episode to do. He didn't, except with this instance, but I was expecting that. That's what Russell has set up, where I can't even enjoy, and enjoy is also in quotation marks, a situation like this because it's out of place. Oh, geez, that lady was pretty nice in the diner and when she was talking to the Disney doctor, and then all of a sudden she flips out. Yeah, in a normal, well-written show, the doctor would realize, well, that doesn't fit in with her character, but as schizophrenic as this show is, for a while there, I was just expecting this to be more Russell Davies, just his mind just flipping out and writing this crap.
Well, and that's the other thing. I think the reason that rubbed me so wrong was because that's typical of what we're being told these days, that you can appear like you're a friend to somebody, but at a moment's notice, you can just flip a switch and you're Karen, and you're going to turn into an istphobe, and this could happen at any time without warning. That's what they've been telling us, that everybody is just an istphobe Karen waiting to happen. You gotta flip a switch, and I don't believe that at all. So that's why that made me angry, because it just felt like more of the same. And it's like, that's not how people work. That woman genuinely was hoping that the doctor could help her. And to reduce her to this Karen caricature, even for a moment, I felt was not very nice to that character.
Even though it was a trick in narrative, it was Mr. Ring-a-Ding tricking the doctor. But because of Russell and the way he writes his stuff, it wasn't something that we could actually play into and go, this doesn't fit in. Because for Russell Davies, this kind of crap does fit in, and he does snap his fingers, and then people just change the way they act. And I mean, last episode we pointed out how Belinda was nice until she wasn't, and she had these schizophrenic moments. That's this type of thing, so I couldn't enjoy the moment for what it was, this odd setup, because it was like, well, this is just what Russell does. I was just expecting this to be another Russell Davies, he lost his mind moment.
Well, for me, this goes back to what I've been suspecting for a while. It really felt like the first half of this episode was written by Russell Davies. It really did. It felt a lot like old Who to an extent. Well, original reboot Who. And it also felt like Wizards vs. Aliens. And it felt like Sarah Jane Adventures. Starting at around the 20-minute mark, it really felt like another writer had come in and taken over. Because it felt the pacing was all wrong.
It dragged. I'm glad you skipped over most of that, because it was boring.
Well, I got through the first 20 minutes, and I'd written down my synopsis and everything, and then I paused it to see what the timestamp was, and I was shocked that it was only 19 minutes in. And I'm like, what the hell? How did they fill up the rest of this episode? And I'm like, oh, it was just crap. Just nonsense garbage. Like I said, I don't know if another writer filled in the second half of that episode or what happened, but it felt like it was two different people writing that.
Which is what last week felt like, too.
Yeah, last week's felt like somebody had gone through and edited in garbage to be included through the episode. But then the end of last week's episode was way worse than the beginning. This one, like the whole second half was awful. First half seemed all right. You know, like I said, there were a few things you have to overlook or just understand that this is the reality of the time period. And if you're going to set something in that time period, then you have to address that and you better do it right. And frankly, in the first half of the episode, I felt they did it respectfully. So I was okay with that. But then that second half of the episode started and I was just like, what the hell is this?
When they were inside the film strip with the Duck Amuck thing, and then they stepped out of the television and into the Doctor Who fans' living room, I wasn't sure also what to make of that. I don't know if this was just making fun of the fans or if this was kind of just politely, nudge, nudge, poke, poke, just kind of having a little joke with everybody, like we're all laughing about this together. Because the one thing that was funny, at least I thought it was funny, was one of the conversations, because they were having this meta conversation about Doctor Who being a television show versus the Disney Doctor and Belinda living it. But there was this joke about what's your favorite episode, and they all said Blink. And if we remember from Russell Davies' first run, Stephen Moffat penned a few episodes, and one of those was Blink. And most people, at least normies, they talk about Blink as like the big episode from that Davies era. And then so the Disney Doctor was kind of like, well, wait a minute, we've done this and this and this. Really, Blink? That's what you like? And to me, that was kind of Russell having a little fun with the audience, saying, I wrote for 4 seasons of this show, and you guys like Blink as your favorite episode.
That was actually pretty funny. I actually did laugh at that because, again, it seemed like poking fun at oneself.
Yeah.
And it didn't seem mean, because a lot of this stuff seems just really angry and directed at the audience. But this at least seemed to be poking fun at just the whole situation in general. It seemed self-aware, and it didn't seem malicious. So I was able to laugh at that.
Well, that part was funny. But then, in that same setup, then you had one of the characters talking about hashtag Rip Doctor Who, and it seemed to me like it was difficult to figure out if this was making fun of Doctor Who fans or if this was kind of politely poking and ribbing the Doctor Who fans. Because it bounced between that to me. And even now, I don't know if I should warn the audience this is making fun of Doctor Who fans or if this was just a fun ribbing for you to enjoy. Hey, he's self-aware of what's going on. I have no idea. I don't know how to warn people or to say, yeah, it was okay. I do know that whole breaking the fourth wall, this is the second episode in a row they did that, because Mrs. Flood in the first episode stared at the camera and talked. And in this episode, you had them stepping out of the television and into a living room and talking to Doctor Who fans. I don't know what to make of that. As that was going on, I'm like, well, yeah, there's a couple of pieces here he was talking about that was funny, one of which was the Blink stuff. But overall, I don't know. I mean, there's a part of me that feels like offended by what he did, but not overtly so where I can warn people away from it.
Like I said, I'm not really sure what is going on. For instance, did Russell Davies even write that part? I don't know. Honestly, I can't say for sure.
I mean, he must have wrote the Blink part because that was actually funny, and there was a little bit of connecting with the author there. Like, I actually felt that was Russell talking to the audience, not in a demeaning way, but just kind of like laughing at the whole, yeah, I worked for 4 years on this, and you guys remember Blink is your favorite episode. And another thing that I guess I'm just going to mention for me is I understand different people like different things when it comes to Doctor Who. We've had this conversation about Star Trek as well. Sometimes it's action, sometimes it's drama. People like different things. But with Doctor Who, this is the second episode this season where I felt they really weren't taking the material seriously. They started at the beginning of this episode taking it seriously, and then once the Duck Amuck kicked up, then they were kind of just tongue-in-cheek, like they just couldn't take the material seriously. And so that, along with those fans that they were talking to in that living room, it just makes me wonder sometimes if the people making Doctor Who are actually ashamed and embarrassed of working on Doctor Who, because that's why they have to constantly make jokes about it and belittle it. I mean, once in a while having a joke is fine, but can you tell an episode that's serious the entire way through? Now, the preview for next week looks like a serious episode, so we'll get to see if they can take an episode seriously for an hour. But that's the question I'm starting to have now. Are these people actually embarrassed about working on Doctor Who? That's why they have to constantly make jokes and belittle the situations that they're in. They won't let you immerse yourself in the moment. There's always got to be some snarky comment or some meta-analysis. But if I'm watching science fiction, I don't mind an occasional, we talked last week about Captain Proton and Voyager, and that was a little bit of kind of having fun, but most of Voyager wasn't that. And Doctor Who, I don't mind once in a while them having some fun with the material, but I want most of the material to be taking it seriously. At least for me, that's what I want. But maybe there's other people that just, no, I just want to rip and make fun of this thing, every single episode. The franchise, the history, everything. This episode, I don't know what to say as far as a recommendation. I can say for me, and this is just for me, the episode did not feel like a Doctor Who episode. It's like I was flipping around on the cable channels and I came across some show and I turned it on. It was entertaining enough. I'm not going to rip on it and say it was bad, but I didn't feel like I watched a Doctor Who episode. At least last week there were pieces of a Doctor Who episode I saw. And I suppose maybe like the first quarter of this episode was kind of a Doctor Who episode, but they didn't allow us to immerse ourselves in that time period in the moment, or even the Scooby-Doo mystery, as they called it, and have some fun with that for a few minutes. They just, right when they entered that theater, somebody snapped their fingers and like some different narrative was pushed out there.
Like I said, it was like a different writer took over, and they had to show how clever they were. Honestly, like you said, I think there is a disdain for the material, and it wouldn't surprise me any if this is just some angry staff writer who feels like they're not getting their due. So they write this snarky, angry, not taking it seriously garbage.
Well, I had a problem. Under Moffat, wasn't there like Oswald? Was that her name?
Osgood.
Osgood.
Yeah.
And that character always rubbed me the wrong way too, like it was making fun of Doctor Who, but that's just me. I mean, I can't speak for anybody else, and who knows? Maybe some people like being made fun of. So maybe people like it when people make fun of their franchise. I don't know. I mean, I don't like that, but maybe there are people out there that like being made fun of.
Well, I think those people usually pay big money for that kind of service. Getting it for free here is, I guess, a real coup for them.
Yeah, usually it's, some sort of woman wearing some latex outfit with a whip is usually what you pay for that activity.
Lots of black leather.
Yeah, black leather. I don't know what to say about this episode. I didn't find it overtly offensive. There were pieces like, were they making fun of the fans? I don't know. The time period offness of some of the stuff. I mean, that didn't really offend me. It almost just seemed like it was poor research being done than they were purposely trying to do anything horrible here. I associate Rock Hudson being a star like in the 60s, early to mid 60s, because I think Ice Station Zebra, was late 60s. I think it was like 67, 68. And I like that movie. I mean, if you haven't seen Ice Station Zebra, I would highly recommend it. It's a very entertaining movie. It's a long movie. It has a nice intermission in the middle. So if you don't remember intermissions from when theaters showed them, that's when you could get up for like a half hour and go bathroom and get popcorn because it was a long movie. But Ice Station Zebra is an entertaining movie. It's a submarine spy type thriller, and Rock Hudson was very good in that. In fact, there's been a few movies I've liked with Rock Hudson. You talked about Macmillan and Wife. That was an entertaining TV series if you get into kind of sitcom-y type detective-y things. So the Rock Hudson nod was nice. It seemed kind of shoehorned in here, but I mean, it was nice. I like Rock Hudson as an actor.
Yeah. One of the things I said at the time when we were watching it, though, was that, the 80s were 35 years ago. It just felt like trying to educate people on HIV and AIDS, it kind of felt out of place. That was anachronistic in and of itself. And then...
Well, it felt disrespectful to the material. I would have been fine if they wanted to make that a point to talk about, but then don't just make it a throwaway thing. Make an episode about that. Mm-hmm. That way you could say you've actually spent time putting weight behind what you're trying to do here versus just having some throwaway line about a marquee at a theater that eventually turns into some harbinger puzzle. And I just thought that was belittling. It's kind of like last week when we said that the way they were introducing domestic abuse, they were belittling the topic. Because having a disease, go through and take out people far earlier than they should have, I don't understand if they were going to do something like that. Instead of using a U.S. actor, why didn't they use like Freddie Mercury, who was a UK citizen? I mean, that you could have done the same type of messaging. You'd have to push the time period forward. But if you wanted to make that story, I mean, Freddie Mercury, everybody knows Freddie Mercury, and that would have been a homegrown British legend that you could talk about versus Rock Hudson.
Yeah, that's a good question. Why Rock Hudson instead of Freddie Mercury? Very good question.
Plus, Freddie Mercury recently had that movie a few years ago, the Bohemian Rhapsody.
Yep.
So, I mean, it would have been kind of still in pop culture. So it was a throwaway thing in this episode. And if they wanted to actually cover this topic, I would have been on board with doing that. Mm-hmm. But then do it correctly. Don't just make it a throwaway story idea. Not even a story idea, just kind of like almost an Easter egg. Just that's how much respect you give it, is to stick it out there and be done with it. Really, instead of covering this topic, you're going to have some cartoon character running around doing duck-amuck Daffy Duck stuff.
Yeah, and that's an excellent point, because we've been rewatching the series Forever Knight from the early to mid 90s, and a couple weeks ago, the episode we watched, it dealt with HIV and AIDS, and they did a much better job with that episode of Forever Knight than the really weird shoehorning in of the topic in this episode. It felt really out of place. And like you said, like with the whole domestic abuse thing from last week, it's like, what did they come up with? A list of issues that they wanted to address, but the only way they have of addressing them is just like a line or two out of the whole episode, and there you go, it's been addressed. It seems really weird. Something weird is going on.
Yep. So for me, this episode, I think it was a watchable piece of television, and if you already have a license or a Disney Plus subscription, you could take a look at it, but it's going to be forgotten. There's nothing here, and like you mentioned in your recap part, this whole gods thing that they're pushing, I agree with you. I was hoping most of this was behind us with Sutek, because that arc just never worked for me at all, and apparently they're going to drag this crap out even longer. That's why we couldn't live in 1952 and just enjoy the time period for what it was and just kind of have an adventure where the Doctor and Belinda were figuring out some weird thing. They had to bring this Harbinger and these universe gods. And at the end, when that ring-a-ding guy was defeated and he went up into the sky and absorbed the light, it kind of reminded me of that kind of space baby from 2010, the year we made contact, when it was in that bubble. And again, maybe that was homage. I don't know. It's hard to know with these people, meaning the people who are making this show, what they purposely are intending as homage. And whatever AI spit out to them is, hey, just do this. I won't tell you where I got the original idea from.
Yeah, because it also reminded me of that season 1 episode with Eccleston, where he went back with Rose and met Charles Dickens and the gas creatures, and how they defeated the gas creatures by turning up the gas, and they got sucked out of people's bodies because of the gas caused them to dissipate in the large amount of gas. This was basically the same principle, except he dissipated in a large amount of sunlight.
And then somehow became a god.
I don't know. That was stupid. It just, I try not to think about that part too much because it really was dumb.
Yeah. I mean, there were some clever lines in here, like when Mr. Ring-a-Ding first appeared, he was part of the movie theater screen, so he was very large, scale-wise, tall. And then later on, he was like a short little guy, and as he was trying to chase the Doctor up the theater steps, and he said something like, I wish I wouldn't have learned about perspective or something, because he actually, was drawn more proportionally to what he would be. And so again, that was funny. It was a funny joke. Did it really belong in this Doctor Who episode? I don't know.
Yeah.
I mean, Douglas Adams stuff can be funny once in a while, but when everything that Russell does has this, it's like, are you going to take the material seriously ever? Because last season, that Sutek episode at the end, the finale, that was supposed to be serious, but then you had that kid on a Segway with those machine guns on it. That was so ridiculous. Even when you're trying to take it seriously, you have to stick that absurd crap in there. And yes, I like Russell's absurd nature. I've mentioned this many a time, that writing. But it's a balance. You have to do the absurd right. You have to put weight where it belongs, and then you bring the absurd in, and then you can bounce between the two. And Russell has not figured that formula back out again, because he was able to do that in his first run in 2005, but he can't do it now. He cannot take the material seriously when he needs to without adding some sort of absurd thing in there that kind of takes me out of the moment. I don't know what to make of this episode. How many stars to give it out of 10? A shruggy guy. I have no idea. This was not the worst thing I've ever seen. This was actually kind of enjoyable in places. But I also left the episode thinking I didn't watch an episode of Doctor Who. It was like I flipped around and found something on late night cable, and I just watched that for a half hour or 45 minutes. But I say that was good? I have no idea. I mean, give it a try and see what you think. But I don't think it was Doctor Who.
I enjoyed the first half. As I said, there were a few things in there that were like, well, that's not right. But I was able to overlook them because overall the atmosphere and the story was going okay for me. It was working for me. But then it hit that 20-minute mark and I was just like, oh, God, no. And so can I recommend this episode? Well, if you're okay with just watching the first half and not getting any kind of resolution.
Well, it's kind of like Dot and Bubble from last season. Remember,
yes.
we recommended the first half of that.
Yeah.
Because it was a very ingenious idea they came up with, and then it just went off the rails after that. That's kind of what this is, where watch it for 20 minutes, then just turn the episode off.
Yeah. Yeah, and I don't know what it is about half an episode being good and half not. Because I'll tell you what, last week's episode, I took Robot Revolution and I actually edited it.
Yeah, we watched it together, and it actually is a good episode. Molly put together an episode. We can't put it anywhere because there's too much copyright problems. But she got it down to like 32 minutes, I think is what the...
34 minutes.
And it's a decent episode of Doctor Who.
Yeah, I took it from 46 minutes down to 34 minutes. And I did that by cutting a lot of pieces out, obviously. And I did put that one scene that I fixed. It's in the Doctor Who playlist, and it's in the Old Man Quick Cuts playlist, where I compared the original scene from the episode to the scene that I created, and I redid the whole episode that way. Yeah, in my edited episode, Belinda actually is nice. Alan was a tragic figure who wasn't a jerk.
She took out all the schizophrenic Belinda stuff, and yeah, Belinda's likable, like I thought she was in that episode until she went all weirdo sometimes.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it still ends in tragedy for Alan, but at least, as you saw in that scene I created, I made it seem like the doctor actually said, I'm sorry, and it got the solemnity that it deserved, having someone that he was trying to save not make it. And Belinda's former boyfriend, again, she was with this guy to the point where he proposed marriage, and in my version of the episode, there wasn't any of that nastiness in their relationship. It just, was awkward and didn't work out.
Well, I mean, this episode, it's almost like keep the first 20 minutes, then just showing them getting back in the TARDIS and going away. Like, that would be the end of the episode. It'd be, yeah, there's a spooky thing there, and then let's get back in the TARDIS and go away. Like, I don't know how you would fix this episode so that it would make a narrative sense.
Well, I could see how you could take and go from the Doctor and Belinda, they get introduced to Mr. Ring-a-Ding, and then they run away from him as he's trying to make it up the stairs because he's tiny and he can't go fast. And they get into the booth with Mr. Pie, which is interesting because in, The Wire episode, it was Mr. Magpie that was selling all those TVs so that people could get their faces eaten off or whatever. Sucked off, I guess. I hate saying that word. But anyway, so I could have them make it into the booth with Mr. Pie. They figure out that this thing feeds on light, and if you overfeed it, it's going to get real big and just dissipate because it's light. And that's when they all go and light the film on fire.
Now that you mention it, this does have a lot to do with Idiot's Lantern. There's some definite story sharing that was done between this and Idiot's Lantern.
Yeah, and if you think about Idiot's Lantern, that's what it was called. Thank you. In that episode... Well, it's interesting because isn't it the same year even? Wasn't the...
But in Idiot's Lantern...
yes, it was her coronation. Yes. So I think this is taking place at the same time. And yeah, and in that episode, you had that whole I guess it was a domestic violence situation where you had the father who was extremely belligerent and just not nice to his family, especially his wife and her mother, in the episode. I mean, and it dealt with that throughout the episode. It wasn't like a one and done, there we mentioned it, check off the box, let's move on. It dealt with it throughout the episode. And, I never really thought about that before, that if you go back and look at a lot of these episodes from Russell's first run, that there is a lot of that stuff in there, addressing different social issues. But it wasn't done in a way that was overt and in your face and made you think, what is he trying to do here? This is just ridiculous. And that's what we get now, is this is just ridiculous. It was actually done with some elegance back in his first run. But you're not getting that now. Now, what he used to do with a precision instrument, he's using a sledgehammer. And he's hitting you like once and that's it. It's really weird.
Yeah. See, I don't think this episode we just watched, the Lux episode, I don't think it was overtly offensive. Honestly, there just wasn't anything to it. Like, if you don't watch this episode, other than the cartoon character, the gimmick of that, you didn't miss anything. Like, you really didn't miss anything. After next week's episode, nobody's going to talk about this episode anymore unless you want to talk about the cartoon character. And when we were comparing it, because there were two movies in the late 80s and 90s that used the idea of mixing cartoon and live action, Who Framed Roger Rabbit and Cool World. Well, if you've seen those films, this was more toward the Cool World end of things and not the Who Framed Roger Rabbit. And if you've seen Cool World, you know that that was not a very good film.
It was a horrible film. But it's a shame because 1952 Miami... Like, at the beginning, I really thought that they were going to give us the feel of 1952 Miami, but then they didn't. It really was just a real letdown.
Well, why not push this into the 60s and do the Cuban Missile Crisis? There's that nuclear energy that could have been released, and maybe Mr. Ring-a-Ding would have pushed for that to happen so he could gain all that energy from the nuclear fallout, and then your Rock Hudson stuff would make sense, because in the 60s at that time, that's when Rock Hudson would be a top biller. Everything would have fell in line then. Why not do it just a decade later?
I don't know. I really don't know. Because, you could have pretty much done everything the same, and it would have made more sense if you just set the time period slightly later.
And maybe Mr. Ring-a-Ding, what he was trying to do was to get the nuclear exchange to happen between us and the Soviets.
Yeah. Well, and, they really could have had a real full-sized episode then as well, instead of wasting a bunch of time on Duck-a-Muck and having tea with Doctor Who fans. I still don't know what to make of the second half of this episode. It was filler. It really just seemed like they ran out of story.
Yeah, I agree. It went from something that could have been something adults might have enjoyed watching along with their kids to just a cartoon, because that second half, as an adult, that did nothing for me. Like, nothing. And I've seen Duck-a-Muck a bazillion times. I'm sure, again, our channel skews old. I'm sure...
Old?
Skews older. How about that? So we all have seen Duck-a-Muck. We've seen him with the flower head, the slop artist, the
screwball flag on his tail that shouldn't be there.
We know all the jokes from that installment. So...
Yeah. Well, on that note, can I recommend this episode? No. I mean, the first half, if you really want to watch it, was okay, but like as a whole, no, this wasn't very good. Go watch Duck-a-Muck, or go watch Scooby-Doo.
Go watch Ice Station Zebra. Rock Hudson, brought up here. Watch Ice Station Zebra. Recommend the movie. Fun movie.
Yeah, I enjoyed Ice Station Zebra too. On that note, well, thanks for listening, everybody. And I guess until next time.
Take care.